I had to race back to our mansion for my forgotten passport, but I stopped cold on the marble staircase when I heard my husband. He was supposed to be at the airport. Instead, he was in our bedroom with his assistant, laughing about how they were going to take my company. They thought I was just the creative talent. They forgot I was also the owner. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence of the house was the first thing that felt wrong. I'd rushed back from the airport in a mild panic, the 2:00 p.m. flight to Milan looming. Richard, my husband and business partner, had left an hour before me, insisting he needed to smooth things over with the awards committee before we arrived. Our mansion, a sprawling glass and steel testament to the success of our architectural firm, was supposed to be empty. "Sandra, you'd forget your own head," Richard had chuckled that morning, tapping my cheek. I was 44, but he often spoke to me like a child. I was the creative genius behind Vance and Stone Designs. He was the CEO, the numbers guy. It worked, or so I thought. I found my passport in the antique desk in my study, right where I'd left it. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I walked back into the grand atrium, I heard it, a sound from upstairs. It wasn't the housekeeper, she was off on Thursdays. It was a voice, his voice. I froze, my hand gripping the cold steel of the banister. He was supposed to be at the airport. Then I heard another sound, a woman's laugh, high and sharp. It wasn't my laugh. I crept up the marble stairs, my heart a cold stone in my chest. The sounds were coming from our master bedroom. "It's just too perfect, Ricky," a woman's voice said. I recognized it instantly. Chloe, a junior associate, barely 27, hired by Richard 6 months ago. She'll be so busy accepting her little trophy in Milan, she won't even see the board vote coming. "She'll be stunned," Richard's voice replied, thick with a smugness I'd never heard. "By the time she lands, her access will be cut. She's the talent, sure, but talent is replaceable. You're the future, Chloe, once we liquidate the joint assets in this house." I didn't hear the rest. The blood drained from my face. They weren't just having an affair. They were plotting to steal the company I had built from the ground up, using my own awards ceremony as a distraction. I leaned against the wall, the world tilting. The betrayal was so absolute, so audacious, it barely felt real. My first instinct was to burst in, to scream, to shatter the crystal-clear audacity of their plan. But a cold, calculating calm settled over me instead. My father's voice echoed in my ears from a lifetime ago. "Never show your hand until you're holding all the cards, Sandra." I backed down the stairs, silent as a shadow. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove back to the airport, the passport feeling like a lead weight in my hand. I checked in, moved through security, and found Richard waiting at the gate, typing furiously on his phone, a picture of focused concern. "There you are," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. His lips were cold. I was getting worried. "You got it." "I got it," I said, my voice unnervingly even, "right where I left it." "See, what would you do without me?" He smiled. I just looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had loved for 2 decades, the man I had built a life and an empire with, he was a stranger. The 10-hour flight to Milan was the longest of my life. Richard ordered champagne, toasting our success. I sipped my water, my mind racing faster than the jet engines. He called me the talent, the creative. He was the numbers guy. He handled the accounts, the investments, the legal framework. He saw me as a flighty artist, too busy with blueprints and aesthetics to understand the hard-nosed world of finance and corporate law. He and his 27-year-old protege were about to find out how wrong they were. They had forgotten one crucial thing: my father wasn't an architect. He was a forensic accountant, and he had taught his only daughter everything he knew. Richard and I had met in our final year of grad school. I had the vision, he had the ambition. We were a perfect match. We started Vance and Stone Designs in my small apartment, living on instant noodles and dreams. For the first 5 years, I didn't take a salary. I poured every ounce of my energy, my inheritance from my grandmother, and my creative soul into building our reputation. I was the one who sketched until 3:00 a.m., who won us our first impossible contract, who turned a small studio into a global name. Richard was the face, the schmoozer, the one who assured clients our books were as solid as our foundations. Chloe arrived 6 months ago. Richard had hired her personally, citing her impressive drive from a second-rate university. On paper, she was unremarkable. In person, she was polished to a high sheen, impeccable suits, a smile that never quite reached her eyes, and an air of entitlement that grated on me from day one. I remembered a partner's dinner a month prior. Chloe had cornered me by the bar, a glass of my best champagne in her hand. "This house is just incredible, Sandra," she'd said, her eyes scanning the custom-built fixtures. "Richard is a genius with finances to afford all this. You must be so lucky he handles all the boring stuff so you can just create." At the time, I dismissed it as the naive compliment of a young subordinate. Now I saw the venom in it, the casual dismissal of my role, the pointed interest in our assets. She wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was sizing up my life, ready to step into my shoes, my house, and my company. She saw me as a relic, a non-essential part of my own success story. We landed in Milan to a car waiting to take us to the hotel. The awards ceremony was that evening. "I need you front and center, Sandra," Richard said, squeezing my hand. "This is your night." "Actually, Richard," I said, pressing my fingers to my temple. "The flight was awful. I think I have vertigo. The room is spinning." It wasn't a total lie. The betrayal had left me physically ill. "I can't go. I'd be a liability. You have to go for me, except on my behalf." He tried to argue, but his protests were weak. I could see the flicker of opportunity in his eyes, me, sidelined and sick, while he took center stage. He was practically vibrating with excitement as he left for the ceremony. The moment the hotel room door clicked shut, I was on the phone. My first call was to a private investigator in New York. "I need 24/7 surveillance on my husband's associate, Chloe," I said, my voice clipped. "And I need a full background check. I want to know everything." My second call was to my father's old firm. "This is Sandra Vance," I said to the senior partner. "I need a full, discreet forensic audit of Vance and Stone designs. I suspect embezzlement by the CEO." My third call was to my personal attorney. "I need you to confirm the status of the trust my father set up in 2010, I said. This was my clever trap. Richard believed our magnificent, multi-million-dollar mansion was a shared asset. He had forgotten that I'd used the last of my father's inheritance to buy the land and fund the construction, and my father had insisted on placing it in an irrevocable trust. A trust that was solely, indisputably, in my name. I spent the next 2 days locked in my Milan hotel room, a general in a war room. Richard would pop in between meetings, expressing false concern, which I'd wave away with a groan about my vertigo. The first reports started coming in. The PI was fast. "They're not just close, Mrs. Vance," he said over the secure line. He co-signed a lease on a luxury apartment for her. He also bought her a new Mercedes, all in the last 3 months. Then the accounting team sent their preliminary findings. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a car. Richard had been using a shell corporation, one I'd never heard of, to siphon company funds. He'd been billing Vance and Stone for consulting fees and material sourcing from a ghost company, then transferring that money to an account for Chloe. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. When Richard came back that evening, buzzing from another successful networking event, I decided to test the waters. "Richard," I said, sitting up in bed. I was feeling a little better, so I looked at the quarterly reports. His smile tightened. "Sandra, darling, you're supposed to be resting. Don't worry your pretty head about the numbers." "It's just this Veridian consulting expense," I said, watching his face. "It's a huge line item. I don't remember approving it. Who are they?" He laughed, a short, sharp bark. It's high-level strategy, honey, way above the design department. Just focus on getting better. He strode to the window, his back to me. Honestly, Sandra, maybe it's time you did take a step back. You're clearly burning out. His immediate, condescending lie was all the confirmation I needed. He wasn't just a cheat, he was a thief, and he was a clumsy one. When we returned to New York, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Richard was jumpy, sensing my new, icy distance. He mistook my cold fury for weakness, for the burnout he'd suggested. He decided to accelerate his plan. "I've called an all-hands company meeting for Friday," he announced, straightening his tie. "It's time we announced a new strategic direction for the firm." This was it. This was his coup. "That sounds wonderful, dear," I said, sipping my coffee. Meanwhile, my team was delivering the final pieces. The PI sent a file of photographs, Richard and Chloe, not just at dinners, but kissing passionately. Outside her new, company-funded apartment, the forensic accountants delivered their final, damning report. Richard had embezzled over $1.2 million in just 6 months. They had bank records, transfer logs, and the incorporation papers for his shell company. Richard was still struggling to maintain his facade. He'd try to put his arm around me in the kitchen, and I'd move away. "You've been so cold since Milan," he said, trying to look wounded. "Is it about the award? I can't help it if they loved my speech." "No, Richard," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I've just been doing some accounting." The color drained from his face, but he recovered quickly. "Good, leave it to the professionals." He still thought I was incapable. He still thought he was the smartest man in the room. His arrogance would be his downfall. I had the photos, I had the bank records, and I had the title deed to the house he was currently standing in. Friday morning, the main conference room was packed. Richard stood at the podium, beaming, the picture of a confident CEO. Chloe was sitting in the front row, looking like a queen holding court, a smug smile on her face. "Thank you all for coming," Richard began. "Vance & Stone is entering a bold new era, and that requires bold new leadership. After much consideration, I've decided to restructure the executive board. Sandra, as our founding creative, will be stepping back." "Excuse me," I said, standing up from my seat at the back. My voice, clear and strong, cut through the room. "Richard, I'm afraid you're mistaken." He looked annoyed. "Sandra, please, we can discuss this later." "No," I said, walking to the front. I plugged my laptop into the main projector. "I think we should discuss it now." The first image that flashed onto the massive screen was a high-resolution photo of Richard and Chloe kissing outside her apartment. The room gasped. Chloe's face went white. As Richard was saying, I continued, my voice dangerously calm, "We are entering a new era, an era of transparency. This," I clicked to the next slide, "is Chloe's new company-funded apartment. And this," another click, "is her new company-funded Mercedes." "This is outrageous," Richard stammered. "My personal life is not." "I agree," I said. "So let's talk about business." The next slide was a complex flow chart. "This is Veridian Consulting, a shell corporation set up by our CEO 6 months ago. And this," I clicked again, "is a detailed record of $1.2 million in fraudulent invoices, billed to my company and funneled directly into an account for Ms. DuPont." The room was dead silent. I could see the board members in the front row staring, open-mouthed, at the proof. "Sandra, you don't know what you're doing," Richard yelled, his face purple. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "I'm the lead designer, the co-founder, and the majority shareholder of this firm. And you," I looked at him, "are a thief." Chloe stood up, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You can't prove any of this. He loves me." I just smiled. "Chloe, he doesn't even know that the mansion he plans to sell is in a trust in my name alone. He forgot who my father was." Richard's face crumpled. He finally understood. He hadn't just been caught, he'd been completely and totally outplayed. The fallout was immediate. The board, faced with irrefutable proof of embezzlement, voted unanimously to terminate Richard and Chloe for cause. Security escorted them from the building, their bold new era ending before it even began. That night, I had the locks on the mansion changed. Richard arrived hours later, his key useless in the door. He banged and yelled, but I just watched him from the window until he finally gave up and slunk away in an Uber, a suitcase by his side. The next morning, I met with my lawyers. We filed a civil suit to reclaim every penny he had stolen, and we turned the entire forensic report over to the district attorney's office. Criminal charges for grand larceny and embezzlement were filed by the end of the week. My company, now just Stone Designs, rallied around me. Once the story of the betrayal and theft came out, our clients were more loyal than ever. They hadn't signed on with a smooth-talking CEO, they'd signed on for my vision. The mansion, my beautiful creation, was tainted by the memory. I put it on the market, and it sold within a week to a tech billionaire. I used the money to buy a beautiful penthouse overlooking the park and to give every loyal employee at my firm a significant bonus. The legal battles were swift. Richard and Chloe, facing overwhelming evidence, had no defense. They were both found guilty. Richard received a significant prison sentence for his crimes. Chloe, as an accomplice, received probation and a ruined reputation, blacklisted from the industry forever. It took time to heal, but rebuilding my company on my own terms was the best therapy. I was no longer just the C. Rediv, I was the boss, and I had never felt more powerful.